Our Asian nations are bracing for the impact of the latest tariffs from the US President Donald Trump slapping a 25% levy on steel and aluminium products with no exceptions. The new rates will take effect on the 12th of March and will hit some of America's allies, including South Korea. Seoul was the fourth largest seller of steel to the US last year. It was the first US ally to be exempted from tariffs on this metal during the first Trump administration. Under the 2018 deal, Seoul enjoyed a duty-free quota of about 2.63 million tons of steel. All of that will now be subject to levies without exemptions starting, of course, and as we mentioned, in about a month. But South Korea is not standing idle. CNA's Lim Yoon-suk tells us more.
The acting President Choi Sang-mok held a meeting this afternoon with the relevant ministers saying that the concerns that they had about the U.S. tariffs had now become a reality. And he said the South Korean government would be offering support measures for firms hit by this, though he didn't give details as to what kind of measures the companies would get. But he also did say that while there are rising concerns and, this time now could also be seen as an opportunity since everyone is really going to be slapped with those tariffs. And so they're really on the same page and there could be equal competition for all the exporting countries. And he also said that South Korea would be expanding communication with the United States. But right now, South Korea, we know South Korea is going through this political turmoil and it doesn't really have a presence since President Yoon Suk-yeol is currently behind bars. And right now he is on trial at the Constitutional Court. And that had been a major concern here for South Korea, especially with the U.S. President Donald Trump going into office and, with no Korean leader to call him or make any contacts with the United States. And in fact, this was something that was highlighted by the main opposition Democratic Party.
이를 타개하고자 세계 각국은 정상 외교를 벌이고 있습니다만 우리나라는 대통령 권한대행이 전화 통화 일정조차도 잡지 못하고 있는 그런 상황입니다. 윤석열의 경제 무능과 내란 사태가 초래한 역대급 위기를 더는 방치할 수 없습니다.
Many experts here are saying that the Constitutional Court could reach a decision as to whether he should be reinstated or removed from office, which then means that South Korea will have to hold an election within 60 days. And so there will be this power vacuum here in South Korea, and whether it's President Yoon or a new leader takes the presidential office. But meanwhile, the acting president, Choi Sang-mok, also did say that the government will be working very closely with the steel companies here. And also at the meeting, Choi Sang-mok did say that South Korea would be discussing the measures together with the other countries like Japan, the European Union, because there is still time left before that deadline that the U.S. have put for March 12th.
European leaders have vowed a firm response to tariffs from the White House. The EU chief warning that, quote, unjustified tariffs will not go unanswered. The German Chancellor adding the bloc will act together as the largest market in the world. And for more, Will Denslow joins us live from Brussels. Will, bloc leaders yet to provide details on how they might respond to the latest tariff threats from the White House. What options would they have at this point?
Well, we've heard from Ursula von der Leyen, the European Commission President, and in a statement, she said that the European Union will indeed respond and that the response will be a firm, proportionate countermeasure, as she put it. Now, when it comes to what exactly those details were, well, a Commission spokesperson was questioned on that by members of the press just a few moments ago in the Commission behind me. Now, Olaf Gill, the spokesperson for the Commission, said essentially they don't have a full picture yet of what exactly these tariffs would look like. He said that the European Commission has not received any formal communique from Washington beyond what we've simply heard from the US president. So he said for that reason, it's very difficult for the Commission to provide any further details on what a response may be. He said simply that they don't have a picture yet. Of course, there is a huge question about what will happen in March when the frozen tariffs that date back to 2018, when Donald Trump was first in office, 25% on EU steel, 10% EU aluminium, were set to come potentially back into force. So very few answers to those questions about what happens then, or indeed what happens before that. When it comes to future meetings between the EU and US, well, we are expecting the Commission to meet with representatives from the US, but only when Donald Trump's team has been fully officially confirmed. But of course, more immediately, we're very much expecting this meeting between von der Leyen and US Vice President J.D. Vance on the side steps of the AI summit in Paris a little later, perhaps in the next hour or two.
Will, no details beyond, no formal communique yet on what these tariffs would involve. But given what is known, what would a 25% tariff on US imports of steel and aluminium have directly? Let's discount indirect impacts for now. What impact would that have on Europe?
Well, when it comes first to the direct impacts, we need to just look back to Donald Trump's first time in office and those tariffs on steel and aluminium that have come into effect in the past. So we have maybe a little bit of a blueprint as to what we might expect this time around. Now, back in 2018, the US imported around 3.5 million tons of EU steel each and every year. Now, fast forward to today, that has dropped by around 1 million tons to around 2.5 million tons of steel now. So that gives you a sense, and analysts I've been speaking to recently have said that that is a direct consequence of those tariffs and the implications, even since it was frozen by the Biden administration. When it comes to ramifications, well, of course, this could have broad ramifications. Analysts I've spoken to say that this is potentially just an opening salvo in a growing trade spat between the EU and US. When it comes to retaliatory action, well, back in Donald Trump's first term in office, the EU responded with tariffs on things like Harley-Davidson, orange juice, as well as bourbon. So maybe a sense of what direction the EU will take.
Well, thanks. Will Denslow reporting live to us there from Brussels. Meanwhile, Thailand and India also making their own preparations following Mr. Trump's promise of broader reciprocal tariffs. These two countries are at higher risk of coming under the American president's radar simply because the tariffs that they impose on the US are much greater than what the US imposes on them. Thai Prime Minister Paetongtarn Shinawatra has ordered a study of the impact of Mr. Trump's trade policy on Thailand's exports. The kingdom had a surplus of more than $35 billion with the United States last year. But there are plans to try to narrow that gap, including importing 1 million tons of ethane from the United States in the second quarter of this year. Exports are considered a key driver of the Thai economy, with America being its largest export market. Meantime, India is reportedly considering additional tariff cuts in at least a dozen sectors to boost American exports into the country. The move comes ahead of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's trip to the United States tomorrow, where he is set to meet President Trump. Mr. Modi is also expected to propose increased energy and defense imports during his two-day visit to avert a trade war. The pressure is on for constructive talks between the two leaders, as a fifth of India's exports of engineering goods are now at risk once Mr. Trump's 25% tariffs on steel and aluminium come into effect next month. But one country seems to have had an early start on negotiation. Australia could get an exemption from steel duties following a phone call between Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and President Donald Trump. The US leader confirmed that he had agreed to consider this, noting America's trade surplus with Australia.
I said to President Trump that this was an issue of some media coverage in Australia, and that we therefore agreed on the words that would be used, that it was under consideration. That's what I'll stick to, but we'll continue to engage quite clearly constructively. But can I say this? It was a very constructive and warm discussion.